Well, hello, and thank you for joining me for another Alex on Tech and ITY TV interview. I'm here today with Max Davies. He's the Director of UC and Enterprise at Crestron. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you for having me.
Now, obviously, UC, that's Unified Communications?
Certainly is. Certainly is. Yeah, very
Okay.
big in our world at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I can see that Crestron actually was founded in 1972. That's 3 years after Intel and 5 years before Apple, or 4 or 5 years. So, what did Crestron start offering in 1972, all those years ago?
Well, as you can imagine, the world has changed. It's a huge amount of change in those years. And we're just about at Crestron to celebrate 50 years of this. And it's been so, when George started, so the company was started by a guy called George Felstein, who used to work in his garage and used to do a lot of things. And what he did is initially was actually invent a remote control for AV equipment. And it was the slide projectors back then. Audio visual and those and workplace technologies as we know them have changed so much over the years. But George invented a slide projector control. And then from that point in time, the organization changed and developed a lot more hardware as we went. And interestingly, George did that in a place called Crestkill, which is just an hour north of New Jersey. Mm-hmm. Now, Crest is the Cres in Crestron, Crestkill, Crestron, and that's how the name started. And so we've grown and grown, and now we're employing thousands and thousands of people globally. Still a privately owned company though, and things have changed a huge amount in that time, as you can imagine.
Yeah, well, look, I've been to the Crestron site now. There's quite the breadth and depth of products and services. But can you just give us the quick wrap of what Crestron does in 2021?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, it's been a massive journey, obviously, from those heady days of sort of early technology into where we are today. And look, Crestron really is the go-to brand for presentation and workplace technologies across all sectors. So our major clients sit in the corporate space, Fortune 500, pretty much everybody in Fortune 500 uses us, but also massive amounts of Crestron in education, in government, and various other sectors like that. So it really does read like a who's who of corporate. So what things started to change really when the network started to arrive, because we were doing things like video management and audio management solutions, as well as control, because that's really where the whole Crestron brand started and remains as its core value. Mm-hmm. But we were one of the first to adopt network technologies. We put a network port on an AV controller, for example, and various things like that. We were one of the first to do that. But then we adopted things like video over IP and all these sort of technologies, which have become completely ubiquitous amongst the technology providers and what clients need these days as well. And then about 3 years ago, we started to see the rise of Microsoft Teams and, of course, Zoom. Mm-hmm. And before we know it, we are now one of the major providers of UC hardware in this realm. And, in some regions, and certainly in this region, we're proud to say that we occupied 40 to 50% of market share for UC, which has seen Crestron take over a much larger stake in that marketplace while still retaining our core business in AV switching and control and monitoring as well, which is pretty big in our world.
Yeah, well, obviously with meeting rooms and boardrooms and AV solutions of the type you've spoken about, and plenty more having been the norm now for many years, I mean, decades really. And you did talk about Teams and Zoom, but what is the big issue in 2021 that Crestron is finding all of its customers really need help with?
It's a very simple one. It is return to work and equality of meeting experience. That is absolutely hot on everybody's mind at the moment. And as you'll recall, when we all got unceremoniously kicked out of our offices about 2+ years ago, and then again, well, I'm in Sydney, so that happened a couple of months ago again. Yeah. We all end up in this scenario of being in a mixed environment and, hybrid at best at the moment. Most of us are working from home. So what we're seeing is most of our clients, I wouldn't say struggling, really trying to look at what the world looks like after we come home from, go back to work after we've been at home from the COVID lockdowns. And of course, this term hybrid working has been circulated, and it's a big thing in our world. But, hybrid working is a little bit of a journey. It's something that we help our clients out with huge amounts at the moment. A lot of it is about preparation, but yeah, that's really what our clients are talking about. Hybrid working, that's the big one.
Yeah, well, the hybrid work environment. I mean, I did hear a lot of people sort of before this second wave of Delta has hit, or this first wave of Delta has hit Australia in a big way that was sort of hitting countries last year, that people were talking about the post-COVID environment. But it's anything but the post-COVID environment. It's still right in the middle of it. Absolutely. And we may not enter a true post-COVID environment, I don't know, for years to come perhaps. But with anyone able to connect to a Zoom or a Teams call via their smartphone, tablet or computer, what then makes Crestron's products different and better than existing technologies in the scenarios, the work from home and in the offices where people are going back that you've spoken about?
Look, exactly right. And look, you're right. We've seen a huge amount of, I suppose, change in the definition of what workplaces look like over the years. And the key really has been flexibility, and the flexibility of what our clients need to do and what we need to do as employees going back to work is also critical to that as well. So we're seeing a lot of our clients having to adopt things like flexible technologies and reimagine what their workplaces look like. And the thing really that I suppose that defines Crestron as being the organization that sort of really will help them to do that is really that the key elements of reliability, serviceability, and monitorability of all these things is really critical. Our enterprise, we always talk about enterprise technology. And what is enterprise technology? It's technology that can be relied upon. It is supported correctly, it is distributed and sold correctly, it is managed correctly, and we know what it's doing, and we can see what it's been up to, and we can service it and repair it quickly. That's really what enterprise hardware is all about. Now, the thing is that, yes, you can do a Teams or a Zoom call from your phone or your iPad or something similar, but that is absolutely a compromise. And nobody in their right mind is going to go and roll out, iPhones into meeting rooms because you can. Because the core values of what our clients need are still very present. And more importantly, because now we've seen most of our clients adopting even as many as 10 or 20 times more meeting rooms in their environments. But they aren't putting extra people on to manage that. And certainly they don't want to spend the money to do that as well in terms of that. So they're spending a lot of time and a lot of effort putting this technology in. And the value that Crestron really brings to this is providing reliable technology to enterprise customers that can be monitored and can be relied upon. And when you stick that in and you look at how Crestron works within our ecosystem and also within the ecosystem of our partners, be that Microsoft, be that Zoom, and be it any one of the scheduling partners that we work with, even people like ServiceNow and Okta, and all these names that our clients rely upon from a networking and security perspective, that is what makes us that's what makes us what we are and really sets us apart from, those low value offerings that can just be thrown into the room, because people try that, but they often come back to us after to have a bit of a chat about how they actually should have done it to start with.
Yeah, that's right. Well, you do it right from the word go and you reap the rewards. And, going in the school environment, for example, we're hearing about schools that are setting up these special air purification systems. They're not mucking around. One in Victoria, they're putting 51,000 of these from Samsung as an example. So, they're going crazy to make sure that they can have that safe environment. And I guess, we also see that schools and businesses and offices and all the AV/IT specialists in businesses, everyone's trying to get everybody back safely, even though we're not really sure yet if we can go back, next month or this month, because we're sort of still trying to figure it all out. So, what are the other ways that Crestron is working with all these companies to make sure this is all done safely? I mean, you must be connecting with these people via remote solutions, but also where possible, you must be turning up to help them install them.
Look, exactly right. I think the thing is that we have to look at what's important to our clients, because a lot of much more clever people than me are stipulating that the work is a place, the office is a place to meet. It's going to become the place to meet, because we've already realized that our home office is quite productive. Let's face it, we can get stuff done here and we can have a little bit more of our time back with our families and those type of things. But what we're lacking, of course, is the ability to connect directly. The best collaboration tool that anybody can sell you is a table, right? Because you can sit across it and you can have a chat to people, sitting in coffee shops. And, that's the bit I miss the most, if I'm brutally honest, the ability to go and have a beer with somebody or sit in a coffee shop, because that's where real connections are made. So, business leaders are looking at returning to the office. They're certainly not looking at throwing the office away. What we're looking at is, and we're seeing all of the leaders of the organizations that we're talking to, and I think that, the quoted numbers are around 96% of all business leaders are looking at adopting hybrid technologies in their environments, and critical to hybrid technologies are still those meeting rooms. But we're going to see more meeting rooms appearing in workplaces and less desks. So organizations are going to reorg their floors, and they're going to restack, and they're going to get rid of some desks. They're going to bring extra meeting rooms in, and they're going to get people to come in for those meetings. But those offices will also be in more remote locations. So you're not just going to have CBD offices. You're going to have lots of different places where people can meet, and they can meet in those teams and collaborate. So for us, we can manage those meeting rooms. We can ensure that they're online, that they can be bookable, and that you know that when you travel to the office, that those meeting rooms are going to work. We can integrate into the access control systems and all those type of things to tell the organization that you're in the building, and we can track you through, because just in case we have to see where you've been, because if there's another COVID outbreak, we don't know what the future is going to bring. We can also count the number of people that are in those meeting rooms as well, and that's a really critical one, because there is a duty of care for organizations at the moment, and they need to ensure that the practices within workplaces are safe, to keep their people safe. So counting people in meeting rooms, ensuring that meeting rooms are occupied, or even that they're not occupied, so you can send the cleaners in after the meeting has happened, and those type of things. And again, coming back to that point, when technology is ubiquitous, but the management spend, if you like, on the management of technology is not increasing, we need solutions that can monitor themselves, can heal themselves, can tell you if they're online or offline, also can report on what happened in those spaces, so we can make informed decisions for the next phase of whatever the next phase might be. So hybrid working, we're probably hitting phase 1 of hybrid working. There'll be a phase 2, there'll be a phase 3, much like there was several generations of activity-based working, if you remember, the buzzword from activity-based working. It's a similar type of thing. It's going to be continually tweaked and modified until we get to a certain point where it hums like a good engine.
So, Max, one of the things that we've heard a lot about over the past 18 months is a lot of the studies around hybrid work. What has Crestron, what have you found recently that is the most, latest findings about this whole hybrid work phenomenon?
I think there's some fascinating stuff that comes out of these discussions, and so we've done a lot of work with Microsoft and various other large organisations like that, and what they've discovered is that the impact of hybrid working is across all sectors. It's not just technology, of course. It's things like HR and that sort of thing. So we know that, for example, similar, and I'll go back to activity-based working. Activity-based working was, and in our world we always talk about the people, the place, and the technology. You've got to have the right balance of all those things. So the technology can be perfect, but if it's in the wrong place, then it's not going to work. And if the people don't know how to use it, then we're going to have challenges. And so activity-based working is going to be similar. It's an HR-driven thing that is going to give people flexibility as part of their working contracts and those type of things. We need to give them technology to be able to support that. And then obviously with this provisioning those places to make sure that happens is also key. So again, we're seeing that I think the stats are that around 96% of business leaders think that that's going to be part of their world, and we believe that by 2022 that the sizable proportion, the vast majority of workplaces are going to adopt adopt hybrid working. And the reason of that is actually for one simple reason: because the employees have a choice now. So you're going to go and work for the organization that gives you the most freedom. And you can pick and choose where you work, how you work, indeed how you live and where you live and how you interact with the organization that you work with. So these are the kind of stats and the studies that we're seeing coming out of this. Of course, take alongside the adoption of cloud solutions as well, and the various and the adoption of collaboration tools like Microsoft Teams, for example, and Zoom. And we see that active daily users has gone through the roof. Hundreds of millions of users of active daily use of these platforms really are defining the future of the technology and the collaboration environments that we're going to be working in.
Now, Max, as we get towards the end of the interview, I've got a few questions about you. It's always fun to learn about the people that I'm talking to. So my first question is, what is your memory of your first computer?
So I guess my first memory of a first computer with it, and I'm fairly advancing in years these days, I'm not quite as old as Crestron, but I'm fairly close, was a BBC Micro in my primary school. And I remember looking at this chunk of beige steel that as it was back then, and the old CRT monitor, and learning how to code. And, I remember when connected to the internet was really that screechy sound and the old FSK modems and those type of things. Yeah. I still remember that. I mean, I'm also a bit of an amateur musician, composer, and recorder. So even back then, I was using Atari ST. So much later in life,
which had the MIDI.
Using MIDI and Atari STs to be able to use Cubase and these type of things. These were the good old days of music as far as I was concerned, and I still got some wonderful memories of those early days of computing.
Yeah, well, the Atari ST, the graphics weren't quite as good as the Amiga 500, but it had the MIDI interface, and that was the real, PAL machine in those times. I just remember it.
Absolutely.
Those
An
days
entire,
were
yeah, an
golden.
entire subgenre of dance music was created on an Atari ST. It's incredible to believe that that came out from one simple device. It
Yeah,
really is.
yeah, unbelievable. Now, my next question is, when was your first video call and when was
Mm.
your first hybrid working experience? Now, I asked that because
Yeah.
I remember buying in 1995, or I had somebody bring back from America, a Connectix QuickCam. It was $500. It was black and
Yeah.
white, and I could record a video. And I was working for a company at the time, and I would make a little 30-second to 1 minute video, compress the buggery out of it, and put it into a PDF. And so we were sending a PDF out in 1995 on Windows 95 machines. That was like a newsletter with a video, and you could do very basic video calls. And also back at the time we had a Nokia analog phone with what was known as a Banksia branded 33.6K PCM CIA card modem. It was very expensive to connect that way, but and ever since then, I had digital phones and I had the GPRS card from Vodafone, and I've been working remotely in a hybrid fashion for a long time. But what was your first video call and your first hybrid working experience?
Wow. Look, really, really good question. I guess mine was slightly different because I'm actually an ex-broadcast engineer. So I used to work in television, and particularly in television news gathering. So for me, I was involved in video and remote video for probably long before it became quite common. But we by the very nature of what we used to do used to have to travel around and follow the news stories. And I've done that everywhere from following film premieres through from cinemas all the way through to literally war zones and time in war zones to do that. So hybrid working for me has always been working on the road and also collaborating with people wherever you could, and always having a base going back. But video calls, I guess, were something that only really came into sort of the fore quite recently because it was so expensive. It was so expensive. And I think it's so incredible to see now that we just take it for granted. We really take it for granted that it used to be thousands and thousands of dollars to actually get pictures out from wherever you are to somewhere else. And the idea of actually having a proper duplex conversation where we can interact with each other is still almost magic to me. It really is. It really is.
No, absolutely. I remember when it was, first of all, real audio, and then it was real video, which was a little postage stamp size thing. And, yeah, I mean, in 2003 in Australia, we had the 3 network, and they had the first NEC 3G video phones. And one of the commercials or the advertisements was that people could use sign language. So, parents could talk to their kids.
Yes.
And they could. I mean, it was something you could do in your pocket, and you could ask questions and do stuff in a way that was impossible if you couldn't hear someone talking to you on the phone. So yeah, we've come a long way. Now, you briefly mentioned some of your history in the world of tech in terms of working in television. But how did you get to Crestron? What is a little bit about your work after the world of TV to move to where you are today?
Look, interesting. I found my way into, if you like, workplace technology and I suppose AV as we used to call it. We don't tend to use the word AV anymore, but
normally it means antivirus these days.
Exactly right. Yeah. Well, that's right. Audiovisual in our world.
Yeah,
but I found it because I was very lucky working in broadcast that we were exposed to technologies very, very early. It was. I'll tell you that when we were sort of in early 2000s, we're gallivanting around the Middle East doing warzone stuff, that we had the first iteration of what they used to call them, sort of 3G uploads and various sort of file store and forward solutions, so we could get pictures back. Of course, I used to point satellite dishes for a living, but there was always a store and forward option as well, which you could use a network for. But you'd normally literally have to tie 3 or 4 phones together to be able to do that. So I was able to bring some of the skill sets around early exposure to video and that type of broadcast sensibility into designing those solutions. So I went out to broadcast into AV consulting, where I was designing these solutions for clients. And then, sort of really, because I was working with Crestron so much as part of that AV consulting, it was a very natural progression for me to go and join a company that I genuinely believed in. And this has always been the thing, is that there's so much technology advancement and it's difficult to know everything. But we do some very clever things, and it's always nice to be involved on the ground up with these type of organizations. And hence, that's why I've sort of ended up at Crestron.
Sure. So, look, from the past to the future, how do you see remote work, video, the hybrid working? How do you see all of this evolving over the next couple of years, and how do you think it might look in 2030?
Yeah, well, I think the key is going to be is that we need our clients. We need to be, and everybody needs to be able to pivot and be able to understand that there are going to be changes. Because if you look at the advancements in, I mean, I'll give you an example. The Microsoft Teams and Zoom right now are very much part of everyday discussions about what we talk about. 3 years ago, that wasn't a thing. In 3 years' time, things might change too as well. So what we've learned on the way is that things change very, very quickly. Technology advancements are faster and faster. We often talk about IT lifecycle. We used to always talk about 4 to 5 years of a device having a lifespan. Unfortunately, now it's a lot less, and so we tend to talk a lot more about device as a platform and upgradable solutions and those type of things, and being flexible with what these devices do. Look, the organisation I work for, Crestron, we're really big on that. We always release hardware solutions that have free upgrades. There's always free upgrades that come along, and they provide additional capabilities on top of what the device did when it first released. And they get better, they get quicker, and you upgrade those devices as they go. And I think that's what we're going to see in the next 10 years. We're going to see devices become more flexible. We're going to see them be more reconfigurable. Obviously, cost is going to drop, and it's going to be more accessible to everybody as well. And this whole idea of being able to work anywhere, I'm not entirely sure. I think there's still going to be a place for the office. I think we often are guilty of talking about hybrid working and flexible working for a certain sector of the workplace. There is still a huge amount of the population who can't work in a hybrid manner. They have to go to the office. They have to not even go to an office, go and work elsewhere. So we're still talking about a section of the workforce that are going to be affected by this. But that workforce is probably going to advance incredibly quickly. But everything is going to change. And I think, as we rightly say, video, interaction, collaboration are going to be part of everyday life, no matter who you are.
Yeah, a lot of those frontline workers, people in the supermarkets or nurses, they can't work over the video call. But for a lot of other people, video calling is normal. And you spoke briefly about how, 3 years ago, people didn't mention Zoom. I mean, some people, even watching this video right now, might be surprised to discover that Zoom is a company that's 10 years old. Who knew about Zoom 10 years ago? Not a lot of people did, but most people didn't. So, yeah. So my second last question is, what is the best piece of advice you've ever received to help you get where you are today?
That's a fantastic question, by the way, and it's something that really makes you think. My answer to that is a very simple one. You never get in trouble for telling the truth, which I think was the best piece of advice I ever received. And certainly when you're dealing in a high-pressure, high-profile environments with a lot of emotion and a lot of people who are looking to you for answers, you always have to tell the truth, because you'll never get in trouble for telling the truth. And whether or not that's talking to clients about capabilities of hardware, or whether you're talking to people about what they're going to do in their future, or even what your plans are, always just telling the truth always just helps. That's the thing. And I think it's a very good business ethos as well, is to be, bring that kind of ethos into organizations, because organizations don't always do that. So that's the best piece of advice I ever got.
So, Max, what is your final message to IT Wire viewers and readers, and to your current and future customers and partners?
So I think my message is going to be that I think in the upcoming years, we're going to have a lot of change and disruption in all of our lives. And we've seen that. And I think we are becoming more and more resilient as human beings in the workplace, and we're having to adapt to things that we really didn't think we would have to do. A lot of our clients are having to change the way that they think about the organizations they work for, about the technologies that they adopt. And what I think is the most poignant message here is that everything is changing so quickly that the ones who will succeed are the organizations who will adapt quickly and will pivot. We as an organization have had to do that very, very quickly. Even in our own personal life, we had to pivot very quickly around the decisions that we make. And I think that's really going to be the baseline for most organizations to be resilient in these times, is that we have to be able to pivot, we have to be able to change, and we have to be able to adapt to the new environments that we're all being placed in.
Well, Max Davies, Director of Unified Communications and Enterprise at Crestron, thank you very, very much for your time. I wish you the best of success for the future, and I hope we can talk again.
Absolute pleasure to talk to you, Alex. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.